Okay, hello, welcome. We are doing another session of Credit Versio's Q&A Live Wednesday, February 2nd. Thank you so much for being here with me. Love doing these lives. I'm your host, David Michalek. I'm a consumer credit expert. I've been in the credit industry and specifically credit repair for about 10 years now. And during that time, I've conducted well over 10,000, actually probably closer to about 15,000 one-on-one credit consultations. So I'm also a certified FICO Pro, and I'm the guy that explains to people why credit scores do the things that they do. Also have a pretty good working knowledge of what goes on behind the scenes every time that we do a dispute. So I want to share this information with you. Every week I get on. Sometimes it's just me by myself, like today. Other times I have guests with me. And the whole agenda is to explain credit. Credit is a very mysterious thing sometimes. Now, granted, people are a lot more knowledgeable now than what they were 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. But credit plays a huge role in our lives. It is one of the things that can determine quality of life in a lot of situations. Everybody's looking at our credit report. This is one of the things that we have to get used to. About 72% of employers look at our credit reports. In our insurance company, auto insurance, looks at our credit report. Landlord looks at it. You'll get soft inquiries on your credit report from time to time from your lenders just to check up on you. That doesn't hurt your score at all when they do that. Just want to make sure that you're on the up and up. You're not doing anything that they see as elevated risk. So credit is a huge, huge deal. And it's one of those things where I wish that this is something that we were taught in high school before we are old enough to get out into the world and get credit cards and then get into debt. A lot of us come out of college with student debt. Fortunately, my college years were so many years ago that you could actually go to college and have a full-time job or a part-time job and pay for college, not like today. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I see we got a bunch of people on, almost a couple dozen. So thank you so much for being here. And of course, it increases as the show goes on or as the live goes on. So please take a second, introduce yourself, let me know where you're from. Always, we have a handful of new people. We do have occasional regulars that like to join us every Wednesday. Welcome. Sofolio, man, sorry if I butchered your name, but welcome. And today, first thing, if you've noticed, the background behind me is a little bit different. We are in our new office down in Tivoli Village in Las Vegas. Beautiful, beautiful location. Rather than being our old office was really nice, but now we're on the third floor. We got a great view. It's a very Tuscan type of office with all kinds of restaurants, which is, I don't know, that's the best thing in the world for me because, man, we're just eating everything and everywhere. So, all right. Hey, Mike, welcome. Yeah, I didn't even put any books up. I got my picture of over here, girlfriend and I in New York. Scott Oliver, hey, welcome back. I'll get your post here in just a second. But yeah, happy to be here and so good to have you with me today. Roscoe, welcome. Thank you for being here. There's a couple of subjects I want to touch on today, but first, I love it when we come out of the gate right away with some questions. So Scott's usually got some, not usually, Scott, you've always got great questions. So let me pop this up. If you'll notice, the comments are working today. Last week when I was on, comments weren't working. I mean, I could see them, but I couldn't put them on the screen. So I was just reading them off, and unless you were in the right stream, because I'm going live to Facebook and YouTube right now. Scott Oliver, I submitted my third round of letters. I got communication back from Experian that one of the disputes resulted in a removal. Awesome. Great job. For the others, they simply state that the accounts were updated. What does that mean? Does it rig the old? I'm not sure what that meant. What you meant, right? What does it say? Oh, does it re-age? Oh, no, nothing. No. So I love this subject, but okay, let's go back a little bit. So Scott, go Dogs, yeah. Reaging is largely a myth, and here's why, Scott, that a lot of us think that things get re-aged, because we're looking at on a consumer credit report, which is all that we see. By the way, we don't see our full credit report. It would just be a lot of code, a lot of comma delimited stuff. If it was in JSON format, it would be almost impossible to read, even if you knew what you're looking at. What you and I get is a consumer report disclosure. It's a very abbreviated report. It has everything on there that we need for us to read it and understand what the accounts are, if it's been late, what the status is, balances, history, all that's there. Sometimes we misinterpret a couple of the fields that are on there. One is date of last activity, and the other one is open date. Excuse me, somebody's trying to get in my office. So when we see that, we think, oh gosh, the 7 years has been restarted from this date. It's actually not true at all. The DOFD, this is the date of first delinquency, is, hard-coded into the Metro 2 code. What that means is the bureaus know when that 7-year date starts. So you don't have to worry about that. Now, as far as, Scott, let me just bring that up. For the others, they simply state the accounts were updated. That could mean anything. You'd have to look at the account and see if anything changed at all. Usually it hasn't, unless you've got late payments that were deleted. The updated could mean that. So remember, and I'm going to touch on this in a second, just because we dispute something, we're putting our best foot forward. We're taking advantage of the laws that have been given to us, specifically the Fair Credit Reporting Act that gives us the ability to challenge the accounts on our credit report. The burden of proof, the burden of performance is on the data furnisher. That's also referred to as our creditor. We call them data furnishers because they supply data to the bureaus. So they have to do their due diligence. A lot of times accounts get deleted just because they're not verifiable. So, and I'll get into a little bit of that in just a second. Okay, let's go down a little bit. Scott, I hope that answered your question. Simply DIYR from Florida. Joey, where are you from Florida? I love Florida. My girlfriend is from Fort Lauderdale, and we have dreams of going back there at some point. Okay, Rob Ross. First live, eager to listen and learn how to get back on the right path of credit. I love it. Thanks, Rob, for being here. Also, too, if you haven't gone through your tutorials, that's in the credit coaching videos. That's in the tutorial section of your Credit Versio account. I did, I think, 11 videos in there, and it's really a great core class. It's the A to Z, soup to nuts. This is the basics. This is what you have to understand about credits. If you were with me a second ago, one of the things that I said that I wish we all would have learned, I would have learned in high school before I went out there and created a dangerous situation for myself, which a lot of people do with credit unless they've got good coaching, is I wish somebody would have given me a credit coaching course like the one we have in Credit Versio. Probably would have saved me from a lot of headache. Okay, Mike, I'm sure you know this already. No one else goes deep into helping us understand credit like you do. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. That's really my mission. There was a time years ago. Let's see, what year was this? 2004. I remember going in. I was buying a new car, and 2004 was great times. I was in real estate. Was making a bunch of money. Had rental properties. Had little apartment buildings that I owned. And I thought, well, I'm going to roll in here. I'm rolling in heavy. I'm going to get this new car. And when they came back with the credit score, I remember this very specifically. The guy's like, well, we can't get you really that great of a rate because your credit score is only a 680. Now, back then, 680 for credit financing was not good at all. Today, you can get great stuff with a 680 because auto money is pretty loose. But back then, I'm like, wow, 680. I thought it'd be better than that. I mean, because I'm thinking, well, my income's great. I own my own home. I own several other properties. Why would my score be, I've never been late on anything. But what I didn't realize was that all of my cards, I used my credit cards very heavily. And even though I did pay them off mostly every month, I paid them after the statement date. So it always looked like my cards were maxed out, which they kind of were. But that was dropping my score by probably, 70, 80 points. But I didn't know. Had no idea. I just thought, oh, good money. I own some stuff. That should be good enough. Doesn't work that way. Okay, simple. Does it matter if we submit 5 or all inquiries? Everywhere I see says no more than 5. Okay, but you all say I have 60 hard inquiries. Okay, it's a great question. Love this question. You know where this limitation comes from? Like, hey, only dispute this many items. That comes right out of the monthly fee credit repair industry. I'm not going to name any names, but if you think off the top of your head, who are the largest credit repair companies in the country? Oh, and by the way, they are a monthly fee. And how do they do their billing? How do they do their repair? Well, they let you dispute 2 or 3 accounts a month. That's where that comes from. In fact, they've done such a great job a branding credit repair is very limited. Like you can only do 2 or 3 a month. Otherwise, the bureaus are going to get mad or your creditors are going to get upset. So there is zero truth to that. Think about it. Let me give you an illustration. Let's say that the reason for your dispute is identity theft. Let's just say somebody came along, opened up a bunch of cards, just wreaked havoc on your credit report. Do you think that the consumer protection laws in there would say, hey, listen, I know you're a victim of identity theft and you got, let's say, 25 accounts on your credit report that are fraud, but you can only challenge 2 or 3 a month? No way. It's not even, if you step aside and you step out of the credit repair space for a second and you look at it from that perspective, what was the intention of the authors of the law back in the 70s when they gave you the ability to dispute anything? It wasn't you can dispute everything to a point. That was never the intention. So Simple DIY, I was just going to call you Simple, but that sounds really funny. So you can dispute as many accounts as you want. Put them all on one letter. Because what happens when those letters go into the bureaus, nobody is looking at the letter going, oh boy, this guy, he's challenging a lot of stuff. Let's just ignore it. Doesn't work that way. The disputes get processed. A lot of it's done manually. Some of it's done by computer. And that person is just looking at the dispute per line, like, okay, I'm disputing my Capital One Visa, I'm disputing my Ford auto loan, I'm disputing my North Island Federal Credit Union MasterCard, whatever the case is. And they send those disputes electronically off to the data furnisher. The data furnishers don't know what you're doing, nor do they care. Nobody cares. It's your legal right to dispute. You can do as much disputing as you want. Contrary to whatever nonsense you hear online, that is the truth. As far as your inquiries go, keep in mind that inquiries, while it's factually true that inquiries can have a negative effect on your credit report, they don't always have a negative effect on your credit report. And neither FICO nor Vantage look at your inquiries or care or even factor them after 12 months. So if you're going to do a lot of heavy disputing with your inquiries, if they're over a year old, yeah, they're there cosmetically. You can see them on your credit report. They play no role in your score whatsoever. The same thing goes with bundles of inquiries. For example, if you went out car shopping and the car dealership ran your credit to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 banks, but they did it all within a very short period of time, that's considered to be one inquiry. The Vantage Score and FICO both understand rate shopping. They understand that you can go through these bursts of inquiries. So Vantage Score, the way Vantage Score works is it doesn't matter if it's in all kinds of different industries. You can shop for a car, you can shop for a home, you can get credit cards. As long as all those inquiries are within 14 days, they don't care what it is, that's one inquiry. FICO's a little bit different. FICO is if you're shopping in the same industry, so let's use the car example. Let's stick with that one. If the car dealership ran your credit report, say, to 7, 8, 9 banks, and that all happened within a 45-day period, that's considered to be one inquiry. So the whole point of the story, Simple DIY, is don't fret over your inquiries too much. The only occasion where I know inquiries play a really big role, where they legitimately can hold you back from things, is when you're going for business credit. That's a completely different animal, not in my area of expertise, but for most people, inquiries are not a thing. Scott, you are very welcome. Orlando, awesome. Okay. Deji, hey, welcome back. Good to see you. And we got a question from you. So the other day I was checking my account. You said something about paying 3 days before the end of the statement. Yes, I realized that my due date is 3 days before the end of my statement. Same day you asked me to pay. Actually, you have a, what is it called? You have a grace period with, I'm not exactly sure how, you might have to take a look at it again, Deji, because usually your end of statement date, and maybe it's just a unique card, who knows, but typically the due date is usually about 20 to 22 days after the statement date. That's how it is on pretty much all of my cards. So take a look at it again, unless you got some kind of a, I don't know, credit builder card that I'm not familiar with. But if that's the case, if your due date is literally 3 days after your statement date, you're fine. Just make sure that you have it paid a couple of days before the end of the statement date so that when they close that statement and they report that balance to the Bureau, you want that new balance being reported. Okay, Chris has a question. Let me just take a sip of my water here. So Chris asks, could you use this software to build a business, or is it only for personal use? It's a great question, Chris. We designed it originally. Just a little bit of a story. I'll make it as fast as possible because I know this question doesn't interest everybody. But the simple answer is, yeah, you could. It's not what it's designed for, but we do have people who are. There are credit repair companies that are pretty sizable that are actually using Credit Versio to do all the processing. I won't name any names, but we are in talks now with out of the 10 largest credit repair companies and software providers in the country. 4 of them we're in talks with to develop their dispute processing software. The reason for that is because we took a leap forward. I had an owner of one of these companies, and they do processing for about 400 different credit repair companies. And the other guy does processing for about 600 credit repair companies. Both of them said the same thing. Like, I don't know how you guys did it, but you leaped ahead of us by about a decade, because they still have people doing processing, and people make mistakes. It's very, very hard to find errors on credit reports, especially when they're 30, 40 pages long. And especially if you're trying to look at this month's credit report and compare it to last month's credit report, and they're both 30, 40, 50 pages long. I did it for years. It's not easy to do. I had to do that in consultation processes when people go, what happened? How come my score dropped? I'm like, okay, well, it wasn't because of the dispute. Something on your account changed. Let's go find it. And sometimes it would take me 10, 15 minutes to figure out what it was. So anyway, Chris, yeah, you could. You could if you wanted. We do have an affiliate program, which people are using. We are going to build a white label. We actually are launching it. In fact, my partner's out there talking to one of our big associates. We're launching our 3 biggest ones at the end of this week, actually. And then next week we'll probably do a lot of software and troubleshooting. But yes, as far as smaller companies go, probably not till maybe the end of the year. It's a lot harder to do a lot of setups for smaller companies. Okay. She Nicole, good to know. All right. The other one is I had a debt with Navy Fed, and it went to collections. Mrs. BPO, 8K. I settled for 5K. Navy Federal still reporting I still owe. 3.5. It's almost 2 months since I made my last payment. So are you saying that? Let me just read this one more time, Deji. The other one. Navy Fed. 8K. I settled for 5. Navy still reporting I still owe. If you paid it, it should. I would give them about maybe another 30 days, but typically that should be reported as 0 balance. And so Deji, is it all paid off completely, this Navy Fed? And also, are you sure it still says a balance, like the full price balance? Because what it should say is 0 balance and settled for less. That's usually going to be what it says in the comments or the payment status. Okay. All right. Wow, we got a big rush of questions and a lot more people joined, so thank you so much. It is paid in full, Deji, but it doesn't say paid in full. It says that it still shows a balance. If that's the case, I would dispute it. That's typically a very, very easy fix, by the way. Use a custom reason in Credit Versio and just say, hey, I paid this off. Include a receipt, a copy of an email, something, and say, hey, they're still reporting the balance as whatever that balance dollar is, and they should get rid of that for you. That should not linger like that. Okay, simple DIY. When submitting disputes, can I submit all my collections and inquiries, or at best to keep them separate? Put them all in the same letter. Just like I was talking about a second ago. Bureaus, it doesn't matter if you've got a 5, 10, 15-page dispute letter. It's all processed. It's all processed as individual accounts. So it's perfectly fine. In fact, if you haven't already, it sounds like simple DIY. You got to go through and watch your quick start videos in the tutorial section, because we actually cover this in detail. I think we do it in video too. So there's 4 quick start videos. They're really short. 3, I think the longest one is 4 minutes long, and it'll walk you through the entire process. But really important you're sending 3 letters. Now, this is assuming you're going to be disputing accounts on all 3 bureaus. 1 letter goes to Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. That's it. So send them all out, all your disputes on 1 letter, mail them all out at the same time, and then it's just a waiting game until Credit Versio swings back around in 40 days, brings in your new credit report. It'll scan it, compare it to the one from the previous month, and it'll tell you everything that happened. So anything that's been removed, anything that's been repaired. Repaired essentially means that there were late payments, or like in Deji's case, although Credit Versio doesn't see a balance as an error, unless it's with a collection company, then that would be a problem. But if you had anything newly added to the credit report that's derogatory, that's not what we want, of course. So hopefully you're staying on top of everything. But Credit Versio will catch anything new. Okay. She Nicole, why is Credit Versio not accepting Identity IQ to be linked to the software? Great question. We get that question about 2 or 3 times a day. Identity IQ went through some internal changes about 2 months ago. I don't know if it's new ownership, but they definitely have done a lot of different things internally. In fact, they approached us and they wanted to do some more things for us because we were and still are to some degree a large client of theirs or a large affiliate of theirs. The problem is they changed some of their coding. They bounce back and forth between bringing in credit reports from TransUnion and Experian, which is perfectly fine. The problem is they changed a lot of the formatting. So when they export their credit report, we get something that's very different. We get what's called a JSON TU code. It's a massive, massive code that we convert into a credit report. So our software and our AI reads that. It takes a couple of months for a development team, our in-house development team, and a partner development team to map all of these fields together to make sure what they're sending, like a Tetris, it's got to link up perfectly. Otherwise, if you have stray code going everywhere, it creates all kinds of problems. So it's a very intricate part of receiving data. So Identity IQ has made some pretty substantial changes to their exporting protocol, and it makes it a really big problem for us to receive the data in a format that we can understand without having to make some massive alterations. So they're aware of the problem. They acknowledge it. They're like, yeah, we got it. We understand it. We're trying to fix it, but we're not really getting anywhere with them. They haven't given us a date, and frankly, we're moving forward as if we're not going to be compatible with Identity IQ in the future. In fact, we're already working with a couple of other partners to bring on board to replace Identity IQ. So it's really unfortunate, but it's not anything to do with us. We'd love to have them, but when you start changing code and we don't have the ability to make up for the problems that they send over, it's just not doable, unfortunately. Okay, Bob Ross, when a debt is purchased by a company, does it appear as 1 or 2 separate negatives on the credit report? 2. Okay, so, well, there are exceptions, but typically what happens is, let me give you a scenario. I'll give you a personal scenario. When I came here, when I got into credit repair, I came here as a client about a decade ago. Credit report was pretty messy. I was one of those guys that was really over leveraged during the Great Recession. 2008, 2009 were really bad years for me. I'll give you an example. So I had an American Express card that was charged off. So I had an American Express charge off, and American Express sold that charge off to Midland Funding. So now I got 2 negative accounts. I've got a collection charge off. We'll just call it a charge off from American Express. Said 0 balance, but it doesn't matter at that point. It doesn't matter if a charge off has a 0 balance or a $100,000 balance. It's the charge off. That's the code that creates the problem, not the balance or whether you've got one or not. Now, in addition to the charge off, I had a collection from a third party collection company. The problem is that was a brand new collection. So even though the charge off might have been a year old or a year and a half old, something like that, when it was bought by Midland Funding, now clunk, I've got a brand new collection account on my credit report. So yes, it sort of is the same account, but you got to understand that the debt that I owed American Express, that debt is an asset. So they can sell it. And if it's purchased by a third-party collection company, which Midland Funding is, Now they own the debt, and they can also report that. So yeah, it's a little crazy. You get double dinged for it, but that's the way that it works. Okay, and Rob follows up. If I settle with the purchasing company, does proof of the settlement go to both the original debt holder and the purchasing company? It doesn't work like that. So under the FDCPA, Rob, this is the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and you'll experience this if you call. Let me use my example. If I were to have called American Express, this is after Midland Funding bought it, and I would say, hey, American Express, listen, I know I owe you guys X amount of dollars. I got 75% of it. Let's make a deal. Can I settle it with you? Before I get through the end, before I reach the end of that sentence, they're going to say, oh, hold on. We don't own that debt anymore. That debt is now the property of Midland Funding. So, for example, let's say that, let's say that, well, I was going to give you an elaborate example, but I won't do that. That debt is now owned by a different company. It's not American Express's property anymore. So whoever your original creditor is, Rob, when you call them up, what they're going to tell you, unless it's like a Verizon or something like that, where they outsource the debt collection to a third party, but almost always, if it's a sold debt, then they're not going to be able to work with you. So you're going to have to work with the collection company. And if you settle with them, try to get them to delete the collection in exchange for payment. Okay, they're not supposed to do that. Pay for delete is really not a real thing, but doesn't mean that collection companies won't do it. They are forbidden to do that, but collection companies to some degree is still kind of the wild, wild west, so you can get some of them to delete it. Okay, simple. Got it. Thanks. And yes, did watch all your videos, but they're amazing. Great. I love to hear that. Thank you. Hardy Michelle, how can I address my disputes with creditors? Or does Credit Versio only let you dispute with the credit bureaus? Like I want to address some letters with the creditors, or is it no need to address the creditors? Okay, Hardy, I love that question. That's a great question. People ask, so why does Credit Versio offer what's called an indirect dispute? So the reason why they call a bureau dispute an indirect dispute, because you are disputing with the bureaus. The bureaus are ultimately responsible for the data on your credit report. I'm going to come back to that in a second because it's very important. So why not just dispute with the creditors? Well, yeah, you can dispute with the creditors, but here's why it's better to dispute with the bureaus. As I said, the bureaus are ultimately responsible. They're culpable for the data on the credit report, which means if there are errors, if there are things that put them at risk, you could sue them for it. Okay. Most of the time when consumer protection attorneys file lawsuits, it's against the bureau and it's also against the data furnisher. So what does that mean? It means that the bureaus are on your side. It means that they want to make sure that everything is on the up and up. So let's say I dispute something and I'm sending it to the credit bureaus. Yes, the credit bureaus take that dispute, they look at it. Sometimes you'll get an auto delete. There are certain occasions where the bureaus see errors. They don't even need to consult with the data furnisher. They'll just delete it. It does happen on rare occasions. Bankruptcy stay violations is a great example where if in the bankruptcy, and we see this, by the way, in Credit Versio, we see accounts like this all the time, where the balance for something that was included in the bankruptcy wasn't zeroed out. That's something that you could sue the bureaus on. They'll wipe that out immediately. Okay, so that's just one example, and it doesn't apply to you unless you have a bankruptcy stay violation, and you'd have to have a bankruptcy for that. But what about everything else? Well, when you send these disputes to the bureaus send them off electronically to the data furnishers. If the data furnishers don't reply, they don't reply in time, they don't reply in a way that's satisfactory, the bureaus have the ability to take matters in their own hands. So they might be able to delete the information or make a correction of the information on your credit report. So it's like recruiting a friend. It's like recruiting somebody who's a little bit better at knowing what goes on the inside than what you do. And if they see any shenanigans, if there's something that is in violation, they have the ability to take care of that for you. So Michelle, I'm guessing it's Michelle and Hardy is the last name. So Michelle, that's the answer to your question. That's why bureau disputes are a great way to go. Now, the exception to that is, for example, if you if you clearly have a mistake. For example, let's just say your Capital One Visa card marked you late a bunch of times, and you were never late. You've got receipts, and you got your bank statement showing that you made the payments. You could go directly to your Capital One and go, hey, listen, here's my proof. I wasn't late. Fix this, and they'll fix it. That's a pretty straightforward thing to do. But you'd get the same result if you did an indirect dispute through the bureaus too. Okay, let's see. Copy that. So funny. I said earlier that when I was talking to who's from Orlando. Is that DIY? Yes, a simple DIY. So my girlfriend's been in the yachting business, or was in the yachting business, for 26 years. She'll say that. Roger that. Copy that. So when you say copy that, I'm like, I get that at home. Okay. Michelle, does that go for medical collections as well? Yeah, sure. I mean, again, secondary disputes, or indirect disputes, excuse me, with the bureaus is a great way to go. Now, the question might come down to, did you have insurance at the time? Are the insurance companies responsible for that debt? Really, ideally, you want to work with your insurance company if you have any kind of collections. That's an entirely different animal. But if you didn't, or it's just been years or whatever, and you want to dispute them directly, use Credit Versio, go to the bureaus. Bureau disputes are great for a collection because, again, they're responsible for that information that's on the credit report. And if they can't, if the collection company doesn't come back, this is one of the reasons why collections tend to be the things that get deleted the most and the easiest. I don't really like that word easy, because there aren't some things that are easy to remove and some things that are hard to remove. It really comes down to, is it compliant or not compliant? Is it on the report correctly or is it not? Is it verifiable or is it not? A lot of times what happens when you dispute a collection, especially medical, is they don't really have the chain of ownership, which is what they're required to have under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. And the bureaus know this. So when you dispute this, the collection on your account, if they don't come back and respond with the correct information, sometimes the bureaus will just wipe them out. Okay. All right, DDA. A lot of credit repair gurus tell people to file complaints with the CFPB after disputing. What is this supposed to do? That was a really big thing. And I think some people do it, but you got to have, you have to have something there. You don't want to file a frivolous dispute with the CFPB. So early on, during the formation of the CFPB under the Obama administration, everybody was scared, and they should be, of the CFPB. I mean, they have very little oversight. I mean, they're in the process of they just sued Lexington Law and Juan. I mean, if they come after you, it's bad news. It's bad news all day. So early on, when they were formed and you could file disputes through the CFPB online, that was a big thing. A lot of white glove credit repair companies would do that for their clients. And sometimes it worked because it was so new. Now it's just been so overused that it doesn't have quite the teeth that it used to. I think the CFPB has gotten wise to the game. They understand that if you are filing, if you have a credit repair company filing a dispute on your behalf, even though they're trying to make it look like it's you, they have ways of verifying that it is or it's not. So I don't know that it quite has the value that it did, say, maybe 5-8 years ago when it was a little bit fresher. You can certainly try it if you have if there's something on there that you know for sure is wrong. You don't want to do it when it's just like, hey, I want this removed from my credit report. It's hurting my score. That's not a reason to file a dispute with the CFPB. It's probably not going to work. But it did back in the day because creditors were like, oh, shoot, CFPB, let's just get rid of this because we don't know how to handle it. Now they do. Now they know how to handle it. Okay. Roscoe, why does deleted items reappear? It depends. It depends on the circumstance. If you've got something specific that's happened, then let me know. I can address it. but there's a handful of reasons why something might come back. Here's the most common thing. The reason why items tend to come back most of the time is from an online dispute where you're not reading the fine print. Here's what happens when you do an online dispute. Not every time. I'm just this is the rule, not the exception. Where if you don't read the fine print, what's happening is you're waiving certain actions in the process. One of the things that can happen in an online dispute is the bureau might delete the item, which is fine, but they didn't tell the data furnisher that's what they did. So that's one of the things that you might give an okay to in the fine print. Well, here's what happens. Since the data furnisher / creditor didn't know that the bureau removed the information, let's just say it's a late payment, for example. So the data furnisher doesn't know that. Well, the next month when they go to update the data, they just put the data right back. So that happens, I don't know, I want to say frequently, but as far as things reappearing on credit reports, that's probably the most frequent way that it gets there. The other one is people think that things get added back to a credit report, and they tend to be collections, and not necessarily because it's the same collection company, but because a new collection company bought the debt, and then they reported it as a new collection. So that actually happens quite a bit. It happens a little bit more frequently with people who are still in the recovery process. They're doing credit repair probably a little early, a little before they should be doing credit repair. Credit repair is a hard thing to do when people are still paying things late, because it's like hitting your house with a flamethrower in the backyard, and in the front yard you got the fire department spraying it off. I mean, you're kind of defeating the entire thing. Okay, Deji, let's see. I had a late payment from 2005, the month I went to the Navy boot camp. It still shows. No, it wouldn't be 2005. That's a long time ago. Bureaus have auto delete for derogatory information at 6 years, 9 months. So we say 7 years, but really just to be safe, they tend to remove things at the 6 year, 9 month mark. I would be really curious to see that, Deji, because that would be sensationally unlikely. The account might be from 2005. I don't think you'd even have any way of knowing that a late payment is from 2005, because the history on late payments only goes back 24 months on a credit report. So look at that again. If you want to send me a snapshot of it, just send it to support at Credit Versio. But it's very, very unlikely. That's an old account. I would suspect that account might be opened in 2005, but even then, that's still a very old account to be on your credit report. Okay, what are we looking like on time here? Okay, the one thing that I wanted to cover, and if you have any questions, feel free to break in. We still have a lot of people watching, so before I jump off in a couple of minutes here, if you have questions, just throw them at me. I'll do my best to answer them as fast as I can. So one of the things that I wanted to address this last week, in fact, I got this probably 3 or 4 times, and normally I don't get them that many in 1 week, but I just got like a rush of them, and sometimes it goes that way. I got a post saying, "Hey, I sent out my disputes and my scores dropped." Okay, what happened? I thought this was supposed to increase my score. So the reason why I like addressing that is because it represents a fundamental lack of understanding of how credit works, how disputes work, and I want to try to summarize this as fast as I can. So, as I said earlier, you can dispute anything you want on your credit report. It's completely up to you. That's afforded you under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. The burden of proof is on the data furnishers and the bureaus to make sure everything is correct. There is nothing punitive about disputing. Okay, they will not punish you for disputing. It is your legal right. Okay, that's number one. Number two, your scores always are a product of the information on your credit report. It's not your personal information. Not on your name, not on your birth date, not where you work, not on your race, not that that's on your credit report, not where you live, not where you're employed. None of that stuff has anything to do with your score. Your score has to do with the accounts on your credit report, all the loans, bankruptcy, parking tickets might end up there, collection accounts, home loan, all of that. Everything that's on your credit report tells a story, and that story is interpreted into a score. That's how that works. A score is a grade. It's a grade that depicts your level of risk, my level of risk. And that score means different things to different companies. For example, when we say, well, what's a good credit score? It depends. It depends on who you're trying to apply to. Some places a 680 credit score is good enough to get approved. Really, the short answer is a good credit score is the score that's required to get you approved for what you want at a competitive rate. Okay, I know it's not a hard and clear answer, but that's actually the answer. So, for example, you might hear people say, "Hey, listen, to get the best rates in mortgage, you probably have to have about a 740." I think that still holds true. So, what that 740 means? Well, what does that number mean? That 740. Well, internally, when lenders look at their data, when they look at their pool of thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, even millions of clients, if we're talking about like a big bank like a Wells Fargo or maybe a Chase or somebody, they can look at their pool of clients and they can go, okay, all the clients that are in this pool of about 740, 750, we know that we have a default rate with that group that's about 0.5% or 1%. So that 740 score might mean that they can expect that you're going to be 99% solid on your loan. And they can maybe take a look over here at this pool of people who have, say, a 675 and go, well, we know that group is about 94% reliable. So they know they got a default rate baked in of about 6%. So scores mean different things to different lenders. But at the end of the day, the score that you see on your credit report will always come from your behavior, from your past and your present. So saying something like, well, I did disputes and my score dropped is a false comparison. It's like saying, every time I go outside in the rain, I see people walking around with umbrellas. Umbrellas cause it to rain. So that's on equal footing. So the thing to understand is, and for the hundreds of times or maybe thousands of times I've heard that in the last decade or so, every time I look at the credit report, this is back when I did a lot of customer support. I trained our entire customer support team at my other company, and they all knew how to look at credit reports and diagnose them. And it was always the same thing. Number one is overextension of their credit card. That's the number one culprit. Number two, thin file, meaning that they got a bunch of deletions. Their score dropped because there was little to no good credit. So they lost some of their credit history. FICO and Vantage Score are looking at their credit like, we don't know what you're doing. There's not enough information here for us to understand what's going on with your credit. Yeah, great, you got a bunch of stuff deleted, but there's no good credit. There's not enough good credit. So the score might have dropped 30, 40, 50 points. Happens. It happens. So anyway, I wanted to address that because I'm not saying that it's a very, very rare thing, but just understand, if any time your score drops, always ask yourself, what happened? What did I do? Look at your credit report, and the first thing I would tell you to look at is, what is your credit card balance? What are your credit card balances? My credit scores go like this, up 15, 25 points every single month. It's always my credit card. Even though I pay my credit cards off, sometimes I make big purchases and I cut it in a couple of pieces. I can see that in my score. Okay. Let's see, Michelle. Let's end there. I'm going to answer Michelle's question. It's a big one, and then and I think we might call it a day. Okay. So Michelle asks, if you have one bureau reporting different information from another bureau, can you use that information in a dispute? It depends. It depends on what it is. If it's minor, like if it's balances, I wouldn't worry about it, because sometimes one bureau just might be behind the other as far as reporting. The bureaus don't all get information from the data furnisher on the same day. So it's okay to have minor discrepancies from one bureau to the next. Okay, let me get back to your question. If so, would sending a screenshot of the issues to each bureau be a good thing? For instance, Experian reporting high balance, but TransUnion reporting no high balance. Can you dispute that information to get the account removed from your report? Last day no. See, these are all very minor things. In fact, it's funny because that was the guess that I made, or the example that I gave as far as the balances before I read through the rest of your question. That was actually the situation. So minor things like that do not cause accounts to become removed. It might cause a correction, but probably all they're going to do, Michelle, is just let you know that they're gonna correct the information, the balance, the date of last activity. That's a pure bureau thing. Those might not ever match. You might have an update on Experian and not have an update on TransUnion or Equifax. That doesn't mean that the data is egregious. Meaning, think of it this way: what would be the damage? Can you say that one account having a different balance than the other is damaging your score? No. If one account has a different date of last activity, which by the way really means nothing. That's a field for you and I. That doesn't mean anything in Metro 2. That doesn't really mean anything in scoring. So knowing that, does that have anything to do with the score, and could that damage you? The answer is no. So when would a discrepancy create an opportunity to play one bureau off the other? Maybe when one bureau has 0 late payments and the other bureau has 5 late payments. Okay, now you got to be careful with that, because chances could be that the one that's showing no late payments has just not reported them yet. If you know you've got late payments, you probably might want to leave that one alone, the one with no late payments, because it could trigger them to go, oh yeah, Michelle, you're right. Yeah, we never put late payments on here. We forgot that. Let's put late payments on there. I've seen that happen. You don't want to dispute stuff like that. But minor things like differences in differences in balance, last activity dates, best case scenario, they're just going to update it. Things like that don't cause accounts to become deleted. Okay. And on that subject, everybody's looking for a reason to have something deleted. And I say this with kind of like a heavy heart, that when you go onto YouTube, when you go into social media places, you have a ton of people who stand in front of fancy cars they don't own, in front of fancy houses they don't own, and they talk about how you can do this and do that and get things off your credit report. And the problem is, nobody knows who these people are. What I mean by that is, in the credit expert space, those of us who do expert witness work, meaning we're qualified to testify in federal and state court, we write impact analysis statements, we explain why scores do the things that they do. When I bring like John and Steve on, both of these guys worked at the credit bureaus. We all have forums that we're a part of. We either have FICO certifications, CDIA certifications. I mean, there are actually groups of us that are experts, and we all talk to each other. When we see somebody who's out there claiming that this stuff works and this stuff works, and we can see that they have no CDIA certification, nobody knows them, they don't come from the bureaus, we're like, this is just somebody selling some stuff. So I just want you to be aware that is so prevalent in credit repair, it's almost sickening. But going back to the question, there's really 2 primary reasons why things get deleted from credit reports. Number one, they're not verifiable, and that's really what causes most accounts to get deleted from credit reports, is the data furnisher just can't verify the data. Number one, there's an error. Now, the error doesn't mean that the account's going to be deleted automatically. The error means that you could present this to the data furnisher, to the bureau, and the data furnisher has an opportunity to correct it. If they can't correct it, you might get a deletion. Now, the reality is, a lot of times, 20, 30, 40, 50% of the information that you dispute on a credit report can get deleted. Not because it isn't legitimate, because it either isn't accurate, therefore getting deleted, or it can't be verified. And that's what happens most of the time. Okay, Michelle, last question, and then we're going to call it a day. All right, I have an old 4-year-old account that one bureau reported late payment, but the other is not. Should I leave it alone? Yes, leave it alone. So derogatory credit, the great thing about credit reports is you can heal from them. You can heal fine. The more distance you put between yourself and derogatory information, the more well you become. By the time 24 months, 36 months rolls past the derogatory event, you've largely recovered from it. So if you're talking about a late payment, which, by the way, if we're talking about a 30 or a 60-day late, that's not a major derog. Okay, those are minor derogs. A major derogatory is 90 days. So 30, 60, even if it was a 90-day from 4 years ago, I wouldn't worry about it. As long as you're doing everything else, you're making your payments on time, you're keeping your balances low on your credit card, ideally pay them off. Please use your credit cards like cash, pay them off. It's the only form of a loan that's interest optional. So if you pay it off before the end of the statement date, you end up not paying any interest. So just keep that in mind. As long as you're, as I said a few minutes ago, your score is always a reflection of your behavior. And the smarter you are, the more responsible you are, you're going to watch your scores go up. When you leave bad credit in the past, you heal from it. And, it took me a long time. I came into credit repair with my average score, my middle score was 584, not so hot. I think it took me about 6 months to get to a 720. It took another 2 years to get to scratch an 800. It took time because I had to prove myself. I had to prove that because there was still derogatory stuff on my credit report. There were some things that did stay on there for a full 7 years because they didn't get deleted. I would say about half of my stuff got deleted and the other half stayed. And I had to earn my way back up into the 800s, which is where I am most of the time now. Sometimes I'll drop down into the high 7s, 780, 790. But it took time. And it took paying attention. And it took watching my credit report and using credit responsibly. That is it for today. Michelle, you are very welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, I love being here. If you have any comments, any questions, a lot of people watch this on the replay. Unfortunately, I don't really get to see the posts on YouTube. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just user error. But if you're coming from Facebook and you have questions, feel free to post them. I always go through these. I'm the only one that answers questions on Facebook usually, so I'll get to them. Okay, thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. Thank you. I appreciate it, and we will see you next Wednesday. Next week, I will have with me John Alzheimer, so we'll really start diving into some great credit education. Thank you so much.